Welcome back. So, big album, of course. The Death of Slim Shady by Eminem. So it's interesting to look back that a lot of the expectations of this album were either going to be very great or very much not. And it's interesting to see that a lot of the audience and the critics have kind of fallen into the middle of that kind of dichotomy of whether it's going to be amazing or just downright bad. So the critic scores are 55 and the user scores are 51. These scores are taken from album of the year. My expectations, and I'm glad I set this up for me before I listened to this album, is that I was just looking to have fun. I was looking to have a good time. And I did do a cozy stream on this. The video has been taken down. I have learned that if you do a full album reaction on live stream without any edits, it's going to be taken down about 90% of the time. I will still do them, but they won't be up as VODs unless I have some time to maybe edit it up and chop it up a little bit. But overall, I was looking just to have a fun time, and for the most part, I got that. I had a pretty fun time listening to this album, especially when it came to around the middle portion of it. Now, this is more of a concept album. Now, whether the concept is really all that strong, I think is kind of up to interpretation. I feel like the concept of the album doesn't get fully realized until maybe the latter portion of the album, which we'll get to in a second. But to kind of start off the album, it does start off a little bit strange with Renaissance. Renaissance kind of reminds me of something you would hear off of Kamikaze or off of Music to Be Murdered By. Putting in the perspective of Mind of a Hater, talking about the Kendrick album, Lil Wayne and Joyner Lucas, kind of stuff like that. Kind of bring these kind of critiques and kind of these same kind of topics that Eminem, like current day Eminem, has been doing for quite a while now. The beat sounds really good though, and I think overall this is the most comfortable I have heard Eminem on an album in quite a long time. He sounds comfortable, he sounds like he's in his groove, he sounds like he's also having a good time, and I think this album, especially in the first half of it, really not taking itself all too seriously, really plays to this album's strength for me, is that it's just a really fun listen. Especially when you think of examples like Brand New Dance, that beat is absolutely bonkers and insane. And the way that the new or the older Slim Shady kind of voice, whether it's a de-aging kind of thing that's going on, or I honestly don't think Eminem's able to do that, but the way that that song just sounds so just fun, just loose, bringing up old stuff like Christopher Reeves and just kind of bringing up all these goofy kind of things going back and forth, and it happens a lot throughout the album. It definitely plays to this album's strength of just sounding just kind of fun, being a little bit on the nose, trying to poke a little bit just to get a little bit of controversy. But overall, I think this album is a really fun listen. Lucifer is another great example, especially with that Dr. Dre beat. That is probably one of my favorite beats on the album. The whole kind of diatribe of Candace Owens in that particular like song I find is pretty funny. I'm trying to figure out if that's the one that's just like I'm like a bookworm. I like when it gets red or something like that. There's a lot of funny and stupid lines in this album, but that's the good thing about taking it not so seriously and also having Slim Shady playing a more prominent role in this album is that you can kind of get away with some questionable lines. I believe it's on Habits where there's a line, it's just like, I'm in Pakistan in a van driving from a Pakistan's. Like, I think in the stream I laughed at that a good couple of times. I think I replayed that. But overall, like there is some problems when it comes to the writing. It's not even just the content of it all. It's just the repetition. Like I can name off like more than off of my hand about how many times Caitlyn Jenner was mentioned and also about they them pronouns and transgender stuff. Of course, the Slim Shady character is meant to provoke, it's meant to be controversial, but I do wish that if we were going to be more provocative, that we would kind of have more of a range and scope than just focusing on a few separate things. That's a very small gripe, though, but it does get a little bit tiresome, especially when you get to the latter portion of the album and these Caitlyn Jenner mentions are still happening. It's just like, we get it. So. But Lucifer's one of my favorites, and then there's Fuel with Jid. Jid brings an incredible performance. Eminem doesn't do bad either, though, but I think Jid steals the show the way that he just changes the flow consistently, the kind of tenacity and the aggression to it, and the way that he's just able to find these absolutely unique and crazy pockets is absolutely fantastic. And that's another thing that Eminem has done really well on this album, too. He's kind of slowed down his pace. It's not all about fast rapping anymore. It's all about kind of finding these fun pockets, having a good time, just kind of laid back. And then when he does find the pockets, though, I'm trying to figure out what song it is. But when he does pick up the pace, it is more calculated. It is more of an actual effort to make sure that it sticks and it's actually good sounding. It's something that is discernible, something that you can actually understand what is being said. Because as I said on my cozy stream, a lot of times I think rappers are rapping now fast for the sake of rapping fast. But I think Eminem on this album, I really can't remember what song it is, but there is this pocket where he goes a lot faster, but it's discernible and it makes sense and it actually brings a nice little bit of fun and a little bit of spice to the song. I think actually it was Road Rage now that I'm thinking about it now. Now jumping all the way down to Temporary. So Temporary, I'm a father myself. So that song hit me hard into my core, especially with all the voice kind of memos and voice demos and all that stuff of Marshall Mathers talking to Haley, and just the lyrical content in that is just absolutely fantastic. It reminds me a lot of Walk on Water off Revival, but the execution is far better. And it's not on here, but Guilty Conscience 2 is another one of my favorites, and that's where kind of the concept of this album does become more fully realized with Marshall Mathers combating Slim Shady. There's this kind of thing where they talk about where they need each other, and as Guilty Conscience 2 in this title, the album states, it's kind of the death of Slim Shady, even though it wakes up is like was in a dream or something like that. But the way that that song is just kind of a really cool kind of character study really shows the peak of the writing on this album. That it showed that when Eminem really sat down with this concept, Guilty Conscience 2 really was the one that brings the concept home. Now, I have been talking about this album pretty favorably, and I do think this is a pretty decent album, but I still do have a fair amount of problems. Again, as I stated at the beginning, I think the beginning of this album does feel a little bit jilted and disjointed. I don't even think of jilted as a word. But Renaissance does feel a little bit out of place on this album, especially to start off the album. It feels like something you would maybe move down towards the middle of the album. Because again, I don't think the content of this song really kind of complements well to the content of the death of Slim Shady. I think again it's just more of something I would hear off of Kamikaze or possibly Music to Be Murdered by. Another problem that I had, Road Rage is another example where the song kind of jumps all over the place and it doesn't really find a firm place to stand on besides that faster rapping portion. I think that's where the song kind of finds its stride. But I find after Guilty Conscience 2, this album kind of, the concept kind of just loses the plot and is completely forgotten of. And then after Guilty Conscience 2, you do get a mix of some really great tracks like Temporary and Somebody Save Me with Jelly Roll. It's another pretty good track. And then you get ones that are just kind of like Head Honcho with Easy Mill. While Easy Mill does bring a decent performance, this song definitely feels like the most album filler song on the album. And then you get songs like Bad One. Now, Bad One is probably one of the worst songs on this album for me personally, mostly because the writing on this song really reminds me of revival level Eminem, where there's some lines that just really, like, with the Slim Shady character, you're able to get away with it sometimes because it's just so zany and off the wall that it circles back around where it's either so bad it's funny or it's actually good comedy. Here, that is not the case. I believe there's one line on this song talking about miniature golf, and he says, like, I thought you meant jerking men off, and then my dick is engulfed. Oh my god. Just thinking about that line now makes me wince. There's one more. I'm really trying to remember what it was. I don't know if it was the Bounce fabric softener line. That was another one that may be on a previous song. There is a couple of lines on here that just really don't stick the landing. And Bad One, again, kind of feels like an album filler song, but the way that that song is written really brings it down to one of the worst songs in the album by a good mile. And overall, I think the way that I kind of put it in my expectations video is that Eminem has slowly crawled his way back into making more quality material. Revival, I still think is pretty bad. Kamikaze, I still enjoy. Music to Be Murdered By was definitely his most kind of collected and most kind of fully realized album in a little while. And I think the Death of Slim Shady is another upgrade to that. I think this concept does work out as much as loose as it can be sometimes. I think that this is the most comfortable, the most calculated, and the most fun I've had with an Eminem album with a very long time. But there is still a little bit of kinks and problems that do kind of hinder the full listening experience for me. And overall, like, I still enjoy this album. It's not going to be anywhere near my album of the year or anything like that. But while there still is a healthy amount of good tracks on here, I'm just going to write rating before I do this. There is a healthy amount of good tracks on here. There is some moments and some kind of gripes that I have with it to kind of bring it up to a place where I would kind of make it more memorable. I still think though, for when it comes to Eminem, I think Eminem is moving in the right direction and he's in a good place. But overall, I think this album for me is a 6 out of 10. I still think this album is good, and there's moments on here, especially when you look at Brand New Dance, Lucifer, Fuel, Temporary, Guilty Conscience 2, even songs like Evil is pretty decent as well. There's some decent to great songs on here, but there is some gripes throughout the album as well as the writing, and especially towards the latter end of the album that I find do leave this album a little bit to be desired. But overall, what do you think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you kind of in the middle like everybody else? Kind of leave your comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. And cozy streams will still happen. I'm just considering if VODs are going to be possible with the way that kind of copyright and everything stuff like that is, which is totally understandable. It's their material. They should be able to own the rights to everything of stuff like that. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.